Namaste. Welcome to another episode of Passion Fruit. Today we have with us yet another prolific musician from the Greater Dallas community, Tanmay Krishnamurthy ji. Namaste.
Namaste.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
Tanmayji has a very multi-dimensional perspective on music. She is currently and in the past involved in different aspects of interaction with classical music, classical Indian music. So we'll hear more about that from Tanmayji. Tanmayji, let's start from the most recent aspect of your involvement with music.
Mhm.
So you had earlier mentioned that on the one side you're performing, on the other side you're teaching, and now you have a third leg, which is that you're pursuing research as well.
Research, yes.
Could you tell a little bit about the latest addition, which is the research? Where did the idea to pursue research come from? What was the inspiration for that?
Okay, so when I moved to Dallas, the first thing I noticed was there's UNT and UNT, University of North Texas, which is one of the most revered universities of music in the country. And I just researched about what I could do there. And then that's when I found out ethnomusicology, which basically is musicology of ethnic music.
Okay.
And here, musicology does not just mean like a theoretical aspect of music.
Okay.
Musicology comes with sociology, anthropology,
Okay.
and more. So the width and depth of trying to understand music is very. We call actually in ethnomusicology they say it's studying music as culture.
Okay.
So it's
very nice.
It's not just about the sounds or the theory that we learn in music. It's also what creates it.
Okay.
Who created and why do they create it?
Okay.
Such questions have usually discussed in ethnomusicology. And I, of course, the seeds were being under my guru Vidwan T.M. Krishna.
Okay.
So music was always, he was the one who probably opened my eyes into looking music beyond just what we sit and sing or sit and practice.
Okay.
There's so much that contributes to how we make music, and that definitely was something that I learned with Anna, and that kind of continued here, I would say.
Okay.
Here I am working right now under Dr. Stephen Friedson.
Okay.
And he is one of the topmost ethnomusicologists too. So I'm very lucky to be studying under him.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
And did that evolve in personal interactions with Krishna Anna, or was that more that he was consciously urging all of his students, including you, to have like a broader perspective towards music rather than just performance?
No, I think his general approach to music itself is like that.
Okay.
So when we are learning a kriti, we just don't learn how to sing it. We do. I mean, he speaks about a lot of other things that happens along with that. So his general approach to music itself, I think, something. As a student, I was like really fascinated
Okay.
about, and that definitely kindled
Lot of
more
interest.
curiosity
Okay.
in me to study more about it. So I started reading about music more.
Okay.
That too, I would credit to
Krishna Anna.
Krishna Anna.
Right.
So I read his stuff first, a lot of his writings, and so that it just evolved. And I
Okay.
would say it was an organic process too.
Okay.
So when I came to ethnomusicology, that was just, it is, I felt the
right
connection.
match.
Yeah,
Okay.
it didn't feel like two completely different things.
Okay.
Of course, I did not have a background of research before that. I did
Okay.
my bachelor's in computer science, so I had a completely different background. So
Right.
it took me some time to understand how to write and how to speak about
Okay.
something not just theoretically. It's going beyond that. How would we express that in academia?
Okay.
So that's something I had to learn in the beginning. But yeah.
Nice. And so your current research here is focused on a specific topic, or are you identifying what that might be?
Yeah, the current one. So I'm right now doing my coursework for my PhD.
Okay.
I'm in my second year. I probably think I would go into a sociological, historical research of Indian music, so South Indian Carnatic music. maybe focusing around 17th and 18th century.
Okay.
A time which is probably going to involve a little bit of Trinity period, but
Okay.
also I want to look at the
Just
period before Trinity period.
Okay.
And something in between, like the Vijayanagara and the Trinity, is what I'm thinking. But I still have to go and understand what is available in the archives and see what kind of material are available to really do this work.
Okay.
So I still have not started. This is just my initial ideas, depending on what's written in ethnomusicology.
Okay.
And to say a little more about my master's thesis, I did a philosophical, I wouldn't say as a research, philosophical, I don't know how, I'm not finding the right word. So I spoke about raga rasa.
Nice.
But rasa not in the sense of just navarasas.
Okay.
So in Carnatic ragas, we don't really identify ragas with one social social emotion of those navarasas like they do in dance.
Right.
But we still are looking for something beyond just the swaras.
Correct.
So if it's like a Todi ragam, we do not like only talk about, oh, the reeve should go this way or the ga should sound this way. Of course, that's very important.
Right.
But beyond that, the emotion of Todi is something that's mesmerizing. So when I sing Todi, it just fills around us. Right. So what is this experience that we get while singing it? And as musicians, how do we look at Todi? Okay. Is it just the swaras? I mean, I personally, I don't think it's just swaras. Okay. Once you start singing an alapana, it's more than swaras. There is Todi emotion that we express through our music, which I called as raga rasa. Okay. And of course, I did go back to the philosophical texts and compared it with. So, but it's not something exactly like what would you see in Natya Shastra or about the 9 rasas and so. Okay. Yeah.
Nice. This is a very interesting connection that I want to make, which is that I'm assuming you were born in Karnataka. Right. So in the time that you were born in Karnataka, what was the impact of Carnatic classical music in and around the locations that you were? How did people perceive it? And I'm asking this as a person who comes from what you would call as the, let's say, the center town for Carnatic music, which is Chennai. Right. So the perspective that we have, I have heard, is very different from the perspective that people in Andhra have. My own violin teacher used to comment every now and then that if you're out of the major cities in Andhra, people do not know what an alapana is in the way that people would know in Tamil Nadu in any village.
Okay.
Right.
But do you think even in Tamil Nadu, every village you would see people?
No, they might not know the technical terms, but they are familiar with the idea of what Carnatic classical music is, because something like Nadaswaram was played everywhere. So they knew, okay, there is a song and there is some, extempore improvisation before and during. They might not be familiar with the technical terms, but what I hear is that in Andhra it was even more devoid of that. There was a very clear demarcation. Now, why I'm asking this is, every place would have its own, let's say, rooted culture that did not break away for years and years. And then there are certain other elements that we would have missed.
Right.
So in that sense, maybe you can tell us about what your musical, let's say, inclinations were when you were young, what made you get into music, and then how that relates with what you're pursuing now in terms of, particularly, as you said, the gap between the Vijayanagara Empire and the Trinity, right? In what way do you see that enables you better to represent or study that phase, or that, okay, there is a gap, it's a gap for me as well, and so I'm curious and I want to unearth it.
So I come from a village in Karnataka called Holalkere. So my father is from Holalkere, and I kind of grew up the first almost 10 years of my life in Holalkere only. Okay. So my father has a farm in the place. Okay. And we have a very, very rich culture even in Holalkere. But as you said, it's not a very Carnatic environment that you would see there. But we have a very famous temple in which we used to have the Rathotsava, and there was a lot of Nadaswaram playing. That all that was a part of growing up. But when it comes to Carnatic music, I mean, I wouldn't say there was a lot of concerts that I got to go as a young kid. But fortunately for me, my mother's side, the entire family is of musicians. My mother played violin, and my grandmother sang, and she taught all her children. My uncle Vidwan Ramurthy, he is a disciple of Lalgudi Jayaraman sir. So I do come from a music family, and my father was extremely interested in Carnatic music too, and his family too. So my father's family too are into Carnatic music, just as audience.
Right.
And so it was there at home for me, though it was not like really available outside. I did not really get to go to a lot of concerts in the first few years, I would say. But because of my mother's family, we conduct a summer camp in
the village.
In the village.
Nice.
So that's also a village called Nidle near Dharmasthala, my mother's place. So in her house, the native house, my uncle and all the sisters, my grandparents, they conduct a workshop for all, the children around to come and learn. So that was a place where kind of music bloomed, I would say, for me. The exposure there was something that made me realize, okay, this is what I'm going to do for my life. Though I was singing from a very young age because it was at home. My mother taught me, my grandmother taught me. So it was just there. But these workshops, or the shibira, what we call it, was definitely one of the triggering. Yeah. That's when I was like, okay, this is what is going to happen. And that's where I met my guru too. So generally in Karnataka, in both the places that I come from, we do not have a very vibrant Carnatic community. Of course, when you go to cities like Bangalore, there are a lot of concerts that a student would get exposed to. But here we did not. But as I said, I did have Carnatic music in the family. And of course, after I started learning from my guru, he made me understand the depth and I think I'm just going to repeat it again. So it's not just about what we sing. There is more to understanding the music. So that's something I started after I started learning from Krishna. And of course, that transferred into my research. Yes.
Okay. Nice. Maybe one segue I want to take from here is, in your capacity as right now pursuing research in depth to understand aspects of music in the way that it either interacted with or impacted culture, let's say, how do you see your experience of being a student in your younger years, learning in India, even if in a remote village, but still well connected to music within the family? So it's not like it was entirely different and like the first generation of students learning, as opposed to, let's say, you as a teacher seated outside of India, right, and teaching people here where the fundamental culture is entirely different. And so there are aspects that, yes, they can relate to in a way that normal people could not, purely because you have the language and the awareness being in the US. But at the same time, there is also other cultural aspects that would not sink into them that early, right? So you would have a different set of abilities or like comfort zones with teaching here as opposed to having learned something in India. So how would you compare your, let's say, early days of learning Carnatic music with what you see as an experience to your students here?
Okay. So again, talking about myself, I think I had a very privileged growing up because my parents wanted me to like do music, and they did take me. Even when I was in the village, I used to go to the cities to just go for competitions and learn from my gurus. I was traveling to Hassan and Bangalore to learn from my older gurus too. So that way I did have exposure, and I think early exposure I did as a person. As a kid growing up in a musical family, I did have a very early exposure. Here, I do think kids as you said, is a completely, they're growing up in a completely different set of cultural context.
Right.
But I still think Indian parents here have been putting a lot of effort
Okay.
to bring whatever they could about India to make their children feel it. I honestly feel the parents' effort is incredible.
Okay.
And I see the parents not just about, I mean, the kind of work that the kids put in at a young age to learn music is just sometimes really
Immense.
yeah. And this is along with what they do in school.
Right.
Right.
And maybe other
Most of the kids
extracurriculars.
are, you know, they're also learning Western music at school.
Right.
So they have that
things.
could probably be the difference.
Okay.
You know, they have two cultures going at once.
Right.
That's probably definitely something different from what we, as growing up in India, we had this one culture around which we were completely immersed into.
Right.
So here it's that is a different thing. But I still feel Indian parents have been putting a lot of effort in giving Carnatic music exposure, whether it's, I mean, dance, Carnatic music. I think
Indian cultural
arts. Yes. I think kids do get a lot of exposure in those terms. It could not be the exact same thing as
of course
growing up in India, but still there is definitely a lot. And I think it's also good that they're also simultaneously getting a Western perspective to all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything particular interesting anecdotes that you have as your experience in teaching? Something exciting, something funny? Or any interesting students that they ask questions that were interesting to you? Maybe you don't think that way, but they make you think a certain way.
I don't remember anything of that sort. But
do you see they're generally curious, or are they more interested in being quiet and absorbing a lot and doing their best to deliver?
So I don't think I can generalize that thing. Each kid is different and would come with a very different set of curiosities too. And definitely those kids who get more exposure to what Carnatic music is in terms of listening to concerts, and so they will develop the passion for the art form much faster compared to those who probably do not get to listen to a lot of, who didn't have that exposure at home, basically. But apart from that, I think kids are fascinating, and they always, every time when I go to the class, I would think like there's so much more to do. Like I'm stressed, and then after the class, I'm so happy because every class gives me that kind of energy. So yeah, that's one thing. I don't really remember any one incident as such. But some kids just send me their summer holiday schedule. One of the kids sent me, like she had like 4 times music practice, 8 a.m. music practice, 12 music practice. And so
they are consciously.
Yeah, they put effort, and they take my words of like, you need to practice to get better.
They take it seriously.
And that definitely makes me happy.
And you believe that's also coming from a strong input and support from the parents, because they are doing a lot to encourage and have that value imbibed within the children.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Actually, Dallas is a vibrant community. When I moved here, I was extremely happy to see the volume of concerts. Even sometimes the fact that it's overlapping in time with other events.
That's true. It's overwhelming sometimes.
I would say it's a good problem of having many options, right? And all good options, rather than having less options.
That's
where
true.
You're struggling to find enough outlets.
That's true.
Right. So
absolutely.
I would, at least my personal experience is very positive.
And because of which we sometimes even miss some concerts because too many events to attend in some weekends. But I think that's a good problem to have, as you said. Yeah.
Segue from there, which is you're also a performer. And more recently, I remember seeing one of your concerts with, I think, Sangeeta Bharati last year.
Right.
So excellent concert, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. As a performer, there is a certain responsibility that, okay, we have to do our best, not keep improvisation in the front, but at the same time, not collapse with multiple mistakes doing improvisation. So there is a certain level of rigor and, let's say, a conscious effort going towards a concert, right, as opposed to just a general practice or singing for fun at home. And that is understandable because you're singing to an audience. So there's a delivery in terms of a performance which is independent of just your individual enjoyment of the art, right? My question to you is, over the time, do you have any specific perspectives towards performance that you realize, okay, what I thought of or how I planned for it 10-15 years back is exactly the same way I still do this aspect, whereas there are these other aspects where either because I'm learning more and I'm identifying new things, or because, like, you're doing research, you're teaching students, so all this diversifies your perspective, and then you feel, okay, you know what, I was performing a certain way then, but there are these aspects that I probably do differently right now. Not that one is good or bad, it's just an evolution of some and certain things that carry on.
Right. So I honestly believe that the space and the context does matter a lot for what we perform.
Okay.
Especially at my stage, I would say. Okay. But I also believe that music is not just, it should not be boxed into that.
Okay.
It's not just about performance. Okay. In that way, again, I had to go back to my guru's words. So he would always say, do not hear the claps or do not hear audience claps when you're practicing, which means don't only create those, don't create only the kind of music that, there's a formula. Even in Alapana or Swara Prastaram, there is a formula for which the audience are going to react.
Right.
So do not put yourself within that box, think beyond that. So I honestly believe that when I have to practice at home, and I try to bring those aspects as much as I can, along with, probably as you said, if for Sangeeta Bharati concert, there were a lot of students.
Okay.
So I do want to include something that can connect the students to the concert. Right. If I did sing Bhairavi Swarajati that day as one of the main pieces. Okay. But how much can they connect to Bhairavi? Right. So I need to add something that can pull them into, that they can connect to. So some of them had learned Durga Devi, so I did sing that, and that, like, that also helps them to understand Bhairavi, I would say, because it just gives them some context in that sense. So I do believe we need to bring in context.
Okay.
At the same time, that shouldn't
be
all of it.
Right.
In every concert, especially depending on who your audiences are, I think you have to expand your limits. And to add to that, I would say, unless we are vulnerable enough to fail on the stage or to not get a sangati right or to make a mistake,
we're always safe in environment.
So that's going to limit you
creativity.
So I do, of course, come from the school of thought, my guru's school of thought, where you have to be vulnerable enough to embrace it and still try out what, I mean, you never know, there are some magical moments that's going to happen on the stage.
Yes.
And only if you're vulnerable enough to let that happen, it'll happen.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to just keep holding back to what you know, and that's it. Okay. So, yeah.
Do you particularly liken yourself in that argument with associating with a form, or do you think I want to dissociate as much from a form as possible?
What do you mean by form? Like what?
So, for example, you said that, hey, I don't want to get stuck in a pattern of singing a raga alapana, right? So would you say that, okay, a pattern exists, I acknowledge it because it exists, but it does not mean that my music has to reflect that pattern, right? Or do you feel, okay, it's a good starting point, and then I want to diverge into what brings me most connection with the alapana when I'm singing it? Or like, what is it to you? Like, what does form in the Carnatic music as a performer?
Right.
Yeah, research is separate.
Yeah. So I think form is something very, very important for a student to understand what we are doing. So unless we have a form, you cannot break it. Like, you cannot just start from randomly picking things up. So you do need to, like, what do you say, master the form before exploring getting out of the form. Mm. I don't know if it's only limited to form. I think there is sometimes it's just the form, sometimes you would want to experiment with the form or just the sangatis. You know
Okay.
what I mean? So this forms would still be the usual format of where would I would start and how I end, but it could just be the way I'm trying to
Navigating.
navigating within that form.
Okay.
Or sometimes it could be just a form too. So
Okay.
it depends, I would say.
Okay.
Depends.
And do you get that comfort? And let me take the example of Bhairavi, right? Let's say that you don't want to do, there are some structures. For example, you start off with a known phrase. You do like a few variations at slow speed on the first column, right? Around sa or around re or ma or something like that. Then you do a short 2-3 phrase briga. And then you go rise up to sa. You again elaborate on a certain set of brigas there, right? You hit the highest note that you can power the according to your range. Then you come back down if you want to add yet another set of briga in the avarohana sequence. So there is this kind of an agreed upon structure, even if not explicitly mentioned that that is the way it should be. I don't think there is any treatise that says this is the way you should
That's
sing
right.
an alapana, but at least in practice it seems to work reasonably for most people in terms of mixing and matching, so that people, in their perspective, people don't feel bored as an audience to receive it, right? That's typically what they go with. Okay, if I'm delivering something, what do I think engages people more, or how do I structure it? Now my counter question to that is, okay, if I want to break that, the question is, how confident am I of the raga itself that I say, okay, I'm ready and willing to break that format. Let's say I'm singing only first column. Just for fun, I decide, even maybe at practice at home, I say I'm only going to sing first column. So starting from Tarasthai all the way up and then back down. No brigams, no second column. Right? Would you say that that kind of an exercise is a feel confidence into the, or feeds confidence into your understanding of Bhairavi? Or do you think that takes away from the understanding, because in the process of going out of one form, you're forcing yourself into another?
I don't think that is in any way going to reduce your confidence.
Okay.
If you try Bhairavi in 10 different ways, it's going to add 10 different types
Flavors.
of
But no,
flavors.
my point is, how do I know that what I'm trying to communicate still falls within the realm of the raga? Because I'm hoping that in 2025, okay, there are some YouTube tracks, there are worst case gramophone tracks, whatever, you get access, and that's your limited exposure to the raga.
That's a completely different point. I think before you would experiment on anything, I initially, as I said, you have to be mastering the structures. I mean,
Okay.
mastering
Got it.
what you learn from your gurus
Okay.
before you get.
Okay.
Of course, I was privileged enough that my guru
Started
always,
earlier.
encouraged to get beyond our comfort level.
Okay.
Even in the classes, so he would push us to get beyond our comfort level. So that helped us. But otherwise, I would definitely say, initially, for anybody who is singing, I'm sure every guru also would force their students to be within the structure first.
Okay.
I'm sure my guru also says this. Unless you master the structure, I don't think so.
Okay.
You can go and experiment. Yeah.
Okay. So generally, when you interact with your students, do you have now senior students that you engage more on a free flowing interaction with in class? I've seen, for example, Krishna has one of the lectums where he has, I think, Vignesh and one of his other students sitting on stage, and he has like a closed door small audience, right? Maybe 50, 100 people. And this is like 3-4 hours on the idea of Manodharma. And he covers different topics, right? Just excerpts from that. But he does that and he demonstrates that as he does in class, which is he says, okay, pick up this Sangati and then now don't add any new swaras in this, just use Mapada. Incidentally, that was also Bhairavi, right? And he says, just use Mapada and don't repeat your Sangatis and try to create different phrases. And then when somebody runs out of ideas and then you just cannot come up with more, he transfers to the next person and say, okay, now you do it. So he's sort of live demonstrating what like a snippet of his class would be, right? So do you see, or do you have students that are learning from you who you think you're slowly engaging to that level, or do you think that they are yet to be there? because this is a question
yeah.
of like how much they're experienced, right?
Right,
It
right,
has nothing to do with their ability.
right, right. So I have students who have just started like Manodharmam.
Okay.
So I think to get to that level,
Will take some
it's
time.
some time.
Okay.
Definitely gonna take some time. Yeah.
I have one question again, because you are sort of multidimensional in your interaction with music. One of the questions I have is, as a performer, there is a time, especially for the like professional performers who are like full time into music, there is a time when you feel that, okay, you know, whatever is the current status quo and like state of the art in terms of what, let's say, musicians are doing, I'm either doing that or I'm at par or better than that, right? And then you have good success, let's say God's grace in doing that, and then there is a time when you feel that, okay, what next, right? Do you think that the search for pushing into trying to understand something, and this might actually be expanded into anything in life, right, naturally would come out of a persistence in that, getting to a place where you're as good as somebody can be, right? And it's not for somebody else to acknowledge, it's for you yourself to realize that, right? Because not everybody performs. And then you realize, okay, you know what, now that I know what everybody knows, and now that I can reproduce to the best extent what everybody or what the best of the people can in the field, what is it that I can do that adds a different value, or what is my unique take into this, because I have my own individuality, and so I can express that. So it could be performance, it could be understanding, it could be theory, like you said, it could be research, it could be connecting dots that is very uniquely your perspective and your individuality, sort of adding flavor and value to it. Do you think that transforms naturally, or do you feel, and again I'm saying, because you're doing research, because you're also a performer and a teacher, do you feel that there needs to be a constant nudge encouraging people to think that way so as to get them to that place? What's your thought on that?
The first thing that you were saying, like how as a musician you would probably identify yourself within the community of other musicians. Uh, I don't know what exactly you meant, but I would kind of disagree with what you said.
Okay.
I would not agree that as a musician you have to think that you, what do you say, you probably have learned or in
Are
a
as
stage
good.
as good. Okay.
Right.
I think that curbs the
Okay.
growth at that point.
Okay.
But I'm not saying the musicians shouldn't be confident. Of course, musicians have to be confident about what they know. But I think that each one of us will have our own strengths and our own weaknesses.
Right.
And as musicians, knowing that is very, very important, than just thinking that, okay, I can do everything in the concert. No, that's not true. I'm honestly like, I know for everyone we have our own strengths, and I'm sure that strengths do come on the stage, and that's what is carrying each musician's music.
Okay.
And there are weaknesses, and mostly musicians would know it, and they would probably not show that on the stage, right? So that's the first thing, and knowing that is itself is enough for the lifetime to carry music, because you're always on the search of how would I bring those two together or balance those two, like the strengths and the weakness.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably my way of
So
looking
you
at it.
believe more in the idea that with every passing day you want to be more aware of yourself.
Yes,
More
of course.
So musically aware of what you can do, what you cannot do, and exploring in that space.
Right.
Exploring the idea of, oh, there is this possibility. Now, can I do that well? Can I not do that well? Doesn't matter.
Yes.
That comes as a second step. Let's explore.
Actually, when I listen to somebody else, I know what I can do in that and
what you cannot.
Right. So that's the awareness I think we have to have.
Okay.
It's not about whether you're proud of that point or not. It's not nothing to do with project yourself as musician, but for the growth, I think that's important that I should know where I stand and what I need to do more, probably to
improve upon yourself. Okay. Then in that sense, what would you say is your, let's say, ignoring the early ages where we're still formulating our own idea of what life is, let's say as a young adult, and then subsequently, what would you say drives you to keep coming back to music? Is it predominantly driven by the fact that, hey, I had an excellent musical background within the family, I have such, God's grace, such good practice, and accordingly, such good ability to demonstrate the music. So instead of starting something entirely different, let's say like soccer, right, I decide I want to continue on the talent that I have honed, I have upskilled myself on, and let me see what else I can do. Is that what drives you to see, okay, what next? Or is there an independent, let's say, I am particularly interested in, sort of deep diving in the idea of how culture and art are connected, right?
So, is that a question for
For
me?
you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for me, it definitely started with my family.
Okay.
I would completely give the credit to my family for building that foundation. Both my parents at home were very, very, I don't know, supportive, or they really insisted on me being very systematic about my practice sessions. So I did start practicing from my second grade.
Okay.
I was made to sit and sing for 2 hours every day.
Nice.
In the morning before I went to school. So that system was there at home, and I was also, my father used to take me to so many competitions in the beginning. Actually, for me, those competitions made a lot of difference.
Okay.
So I used to win all those competitions at third, fourth grade, and I knew, okay, I'm good at it, and I think this is what I want. I should be doing.
Nice. So it was reinforcing.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So for me, it was that, and also, as I told you, my grandparents' house, we had this workshop,
right,
where
Shibiram.
I got to meet a lot of musicians.
Okay.
I listened to a lot of musicians there, and there were a lot of other kids who were learning of my same age, who were learning
Okay.
from different gurus and would come and sing, and that kind of created a community also for me.
Okay.
And it also gave me exposure to these legendary musicians coming and telling stories about how they practiced, what they practiced, and what those practices gave them. So that inspired me to go back and, start doing more practice and more listening and so on. So for me, definitely the family that
That's a huge impact.
Yes.
Okay.
And then at one point, I even thought maybe when I came to my college, I probably did not think that I would continue that.
Okay.
At some point. But then again, my guru at that time accepted me as his student, and that again changed my life.
Okay.
There was no looking back after that. I knew I was going to sing. So yeah.
Okay. So in your case, you strongly believe that whatever might have happened subsequently, like the family and the fact that they were rooted into music, that set you up.
Yes,
going
definitely.
forward.
Yes, that's true.
That's nice. Would you say that in the current generation, again, maybe comparing between your time as a student, let's say in your high school, middle school times, compared to now, would you say that the technological advancements in terms of supporting your ability to learn, right, particularly for an art form, I would say in most of the things in Indian culture, the priority was to listen, right, to keep listening as much as possible. And then now you have ability to support that learning in different media formats. I strongly appreciate the idea that there is different abilities that are proposed to us so that we can use what we're most comfortable with. But for a culture that was consistently using the idea of learning by the ear, right, and that developed notations only because notations became common, not because that was necessary for learning, how do you relate to this idea? I mean, I guess all of us will support any technological one. Nobody is going to say that we should not have this, but particular to learning Carnatic music, do you think that, okay, same like the format, you wait and you do what is the traditional way of learning, which is by the ear to begin with, and then when you get really comfortable, break out into using other multimedia formats, or do you view it differently?
So yeah, I have very strong opinions about media and how Carnatic music is kind of taking a new shape right now with social media right now. As a teacher, I feel it's not a very good source for I mean, of course I agree that listening is one of the best ways to learn. I do encourage my students to listen to music, but I also feel it's very challenging with so much of content out there. I see a lot of times I would try to teach some song, and those kids would have learned in some other.
Right.
It's very, very difficult to change those gammakams and make
Right.
them understand
Why
why I am trying to say this.
Right.
I mean, this is also probably like, for you were asking about an anecdote about class. So there was one kid recently asked me, do I really have to change my way of singing? I've already learnt it. And she asked me, have you ever relearned some Kriti before? I mean, she's very curiously asking me.
Yes.
And then I said, yes, I've learned a lot of Kritis. I've relearned a lot of Kritis after realizing, okay, what I was doing earlier was wrong. So there is something called wrong and right way of doing gamakas within the context of raga.
Or the
So
song,
so not everything that you listen to on social media could be right. Sometimes they are.
Right.
I'm not saying it's always, but sometimes it's also, you have to be very careful on what you listen to, and that could that's definitely a challenge these days for kids. And probably they wouldn't even, like little kids, they wouldn't even know the difference between
why
different styles of singing.
It takes some time for you to gather that knowledge to differ.
They're like, when I teach in a different tune, they're like, no, I don't want to learn this. I want to sing the other way. I know it, I've heard it. So those challenges are there, especially with the little ones. But of course, otherwise, yeah, listening is definitely one of the.
No, I want to ask two questions. Let me start off with the one that's most related to this, which is that I think I entirely agree, and not that my agreeing or disagreeing has any value here, but a lot of what is heard over audio is typically from a performance, and performance is bound to have errors.
Right.
Whereas if there was a live practice session which was recorded, then the musician is going to hold themselves back, correct it, and then move on. So you have a higher likelihood of learning the rag or the nuance of the kriti or whatever is it that you're looking for from a practice session that was recorded, right? Or a live lekdom or a class, because they do that, and they do have that online, and they share it sometimes for money, sometimes for free. So those kind of lekdams, I was like recently, I think in the Cleveland Tyagaraja Aradhana 2 years back, Sugunama, she was teaching, or she was going through the concept of Ragam Thanam Pallavi. So there she stops people, and these are all adults, as they're trying it out, she stops people and says, okay, look, when you go this in Arohanam, generally that prayogam is not used. So then what happens is, as opposed to me listening to something and thinking this sounds nice, right, I'm trained more to understand what's the actual flow, or the, as in Hindi they call the chalan of the rag, right? And then you say, okay, now that I understand, well, like you said, you can expand into having your own ideas and see whether they look nice or they fit well or whatever that is. But my question is more on the side of media and supporting learning, in the sense that there are apps, for example, that transfer the frequency that you sing into a timeline, right? And they have y-axis, which is the English frequency, C, D, C sharp, etc., etc. So for example, if I want to know if I'm singing the ga with sa set to any shruti, let's say at C, and if I want to see that, if I want to know that my ga or my ma is accurate, right, I do whatever, and then I land on ma, and then I can look at the app to tell me whether I'm accurately on the frequency or I'm higher or lower, right? The good thing with that is there is a feedback. One could argue the downside to that is you reduce your ability to train your ear to know what is right and wrong. You become more dependent to external activation of feedback, right, which is entirely outside of you, right? Going one step further, there are even apps that I'm familiar with. I don't know if this has been expanded into the Carnatic music or Indian classic music, that transform this into colors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what they are trying to do is they are trying to feedback with colors for dance and for music, with the aim or hope to make people most conveniently relate to color. And so every time it goes wrong, go towards a color that they most often do not prefer. It need not be red. It's a question of your color choice.
Okay.
So if you are if you like pink and red, then more reaffirmations are of positive affirmations are going to come from that color, and more negative affirmations are going to come from something else. Now, I like the idea that this enables learning to different kinds of people, but that was more of my question towards, in that process of learning, at some point you have to remember that, okay, that's still a ladder, and you don't want to always hold on to the ladder, right? You want to be going back to the ear, right? So do you see that as a support, or do you see that as taking away from what's more rigorous, more time consuming, more effort driven, more challenging learning, where you do not use all the support systems?
Right. I mean, I do think technology should be used to help, but at the same time, as you said, if you're using frequencies to identify your pitch, like you're probably reducing uh, your own ability to identify things or be correct on the stage. That's okay. I mean, I'd say that's also okay, but looking beyond that, what happens to music itself when you start using that?
Right.
So the way you would sing the pa, if you have to just land on that exact frequency, do you always sing pa like that? No. When you're singing pa in Todi or Bhairavi, it has a movement to it. If you think of it as just one frequency, you're probably losing the raga there.
Right.
So I think we have to think about what happens to music when you use technology. Otherwise, I think using technology is probably, like as you said, if you can upload uh, free music for somebody who do not have access to it, that's absolutely an amazing thing that you're doing. But how you use it and is very important, and that should also, I mean, you should probably critically think before doing such, just even the pitch corrections and all that.
Okay.
I think we need to be a little more critical about how it affects the music.
Okay. Do you think that, and I mean, you can wish not to answer, but in general, do you think that there is a tendency to not be honest with criticisms in the Indian classical arts? And I do not mean personal, I do not mean a question of choice. My assumption is that, okay, in the framework that they are performing, are they really doing a good job of performing, right? And this is not a new question, right? Because one of the issues with art is that, on the one hand, it is a creative endeavor, which means that you cannot put it within a framework and say it has to work a certain way. So yes, in the Olympics, freestyling, gymnastics, or like all these figure skating and all these things look nice, but the judgment is made on very specific things like triple spins and things like that. So again, it becomes more of an objective judgment on an art, right? So there is that limitation that the critiquing of an art is a very subjective process, just as the artist itself or himself or herself demonstrates that art. But the lack of criticism enables anything to be accepted, right? And there is one common thing that people say in physics: we are looking for the theory of everything, we are not looking for the theory of anything. And there's a big difference between the two, right? A theory of everything is a theory that encompasses all known physical understanding of life. That's very different from saying a theory of anything, which means it does not matter if it is right or wrong. Even for the things that we know, the model will accept that, right? So similarly, a lack of criticism entirely, or like a complete dividance of criticism, puts you in that space where anything is accepted, because art is a subjective framework, and creativity cannot be specifically said that, you cannot specifically say that this is right and this is wrong. At the same time, like we discussed in the previous question or the previous discussion, which is, there is a certain form to it, right? You're welcome to break the form and still you will end up at a new form. So it is not necessarily the rigor to a single form that is being in question, right? As opposed to the idea of what is the idea that the person is trying to communicate, and in that framework, are they doing a really good job of communication? It might not be my preferred framework of communication, but there should be some level of criticism for where we stand, what should be the right way to move forward. Do you think, one, that exists? Do you think it exists more than we want, or do you think it does not exist as much, in your personal opinion?
You mean like the criticism exists, or?
Yeah, critiquing, positive critiquing, and I don't mean in terms of personal critiquing or like random stuff. Taking a music, understanding the alapana and saying, look, this part was nice, but here I felt that they were meandering too much, or this part was nice, but here I felt they were repeating, and the moment they realize they're repeating, they should have gone to something else.
Right.
That kind of a critique, which is a little bit more constructive, where the performer also understands that, hey, this guy is not just sitting there, right? He's also paying attention, right? So that kind of criticism, do you think it exists at all? Do you think we overdo it, even if it is not formal? People randomly walk up to the musicians and give a lot of comments, or do you think we underdo it and all these comments are very platonic, very superficial, nothing that actually is very intense, very thoughtful, or very emotional?
I think it depends on where we are performing and
Okay.
for whom we are performing to.
Okay.
So it probably exists. I mean, some kind of criticism does exist in every space.
Right.
Personally, I wouldn't put myself in the center and look at those criticism. I would put music in the center and look at it.
Right.
So if it's definitely something that's going to add to the music, then
You
of
accept
course,
it.
yes,
Right.
it is something that I need to be thinking about. If it's not for the music, then I wouldn't really
Right.
think about it. But as you said, the structural wise, I do have my critics in my family who will probably give me the kind of critique that you were talking about, like, you did wander
Okay.
here, or you did not do that. I've never had any audience coming and telling me exactly like this, so this ragam was good, or this. So usually I've not seen audience randomly coming and talking about those nuances, technical nuances. They'll probably judge you as good or bad.
Right.
I wouldn't think they would come
More
and
big
give
picture.
it, yeah, more big picture, and
Right.
they would, I mean, they would think whether they want to come back to your concert or
Yes,
not. It is just
actually,
two-way.
that's-
I think that's
Right.
what they, and that's what makes a concert a little more pressurized for some musicians too.
Okay.
Because when you sing, it's just two for the audience. That's what I believe.
Okay.
And that has and constructive criticism, of course, the close people would come and do. I think that's definitely needed for every musician. And I also believe that it's important that I come back and listen to myself, which is very hard.
It's very
I cannot
hard.
listen
Yes.
to myself, but I
Yes.
think it's very, very important that I do listen to myself. And then it's very difficult, and I should pause and say, okay, this is the place I need to be working on.
Okay.
So I think that's very important. And maybe I don't think such criticism comes from audience.
Okay. So would you say that it is okay as it is, and that you're getting the right kind of feedback, albeit from different sources, but you're still getting it? Or would you say, no, there should be more proactive, or no, they should dial it down? And it's a big picture question. It need not be specific.
I don't know. I don't know. I've never thought
Do you
about
feel
it.
at the end of a concert, like something like at Sangeeta Bharati's concert, that not that you're expecting that to happen, but that if people came up and pointed to specific things and said, hey, at that ragam, at that particular place, when you're doing the brigas and you're going in Arohanam, as a vocalist, I know it's not easy to achieve that consistency. And so I really appreciate that you sang that Sangati and you sang it that particular way, because I can relate to what makes it right, even if it is not necessarily always flashy and catchy, that it would get an applause, right? That level of understanding. And what I mean by criticism is not always that somebody finds a mistake in what you do.
Right. I understand.
It is just a level of appreciation that is a little bit more honest rather than more platonic and being polite at the face, which definitely should be there. We should not be impolite, right? But in that level, do you feel that you look for that, or do you feel that will happen when it happens, and I'm not too worried if it does not happen?
No, I think that kind of loses the entire purpose if the audience is actually talking about particular Sangatis. I think it's about, did Bhairavi happen that day, should be the question.
Okay.
If you point to this Sangati, this note and this Gamakam, I think you're like really losing the bigger picture.
Intellectualization.
Yeah, that's,
yes,
of course, that's needed,
but not overdo it.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, that is what is going to give you the experience of Bhairavi. And it's definitely the real foundation, and we need it. And we need critiques to, I mean, like, I need my mom to come, and I would even sometimes argue with her if she doesn't say anything. I need you to tell me, like, what exactly happened. How did you think? If she just gives one word answer saying good or bad, I don't want that kind of a review
Right.
from my mom
Right.
or somebody who is very close to me. But as an audience, when I sit in a concert, I think it's the Bhairavi that you should feel and experience, rather than seeing how many swarams did she do or what a
Patterns.
note.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it just should I mean, what do you say?
Should go beyond the form.
Exactly, and it's like that. There should be. It's like it should take you to another world of Bhairavi itself than the physical world of technicalities. Yeah,
Technicalities. Right. Got it. Got it. Have you ever faced any major roadblock? Not in terms of like physical reality, like I was not well or I, got injured. Not like that, but mental roadblock where you felt, okay, I'm here, and for the past few months or few weeks I'm not able to see beyond this. So what next? Not necessarily because I have to push beyond, but you start feeling that, okay, this is getting stale, and it might simultaneously be along with something else being interesting in music. But there is this other place, either in performance or in teaching, or like maybe soon in research. My question around that is, have you ever faced such a roadblock, and in that particular instance at least, what helped you come out of that?
Yeah, of course, I've faced it so many times.
Okay.
And I do feel as a musician, when you're like really performer, you sometimes are alone.
Okay.
You just wake up, practice, eat, go to bed, wake up, practice. So you have to get into that cycle of just doing that again and again and again, and it can be sometimes just uh, could feel that you don't have anyone to kind of have that interaction with. And I have had many times where I would constantly practice a lot, but still, like, what am I doing?
Okay.
Such phases have been there. And I have gone to other forms to just find some kind of inspiration at that point.
Okay.
And I've gone to legendary musicians' music. So I would be singing some ragam for a couple of days, and then I'm not able to find anything in that.
Okay.
Then you listen to somebody.
Right. And creates a sponge.
Yeah. So that has happened too.
Okay.
And in my singing, I would say, class, I don't know, I just love kids.
Okay.
I just love to interact with them, and it has always been like, every time I think, okay, I don't want to teach more, I just love it. So I just want to go back and teach. That it's more of a, such a fun thing, and I think that adds so much value to life after I started teaching. So I realized that. So it's always been that.
Okay.
I'm happy and I'm very blessed for that. Research, I think, in the university, of course, when you get into the real research part, you're alone again.
Right.
You exactly like how you practice, it's like you're the only one. But in the coursework, it's much of a community that you have.
Okay.
So we do read something, we go back to the class, and we talk about that same material from different cultures. So I have colleagues who are working on African music.
Nice.
One of my colleagues is working on Hindustani music. So I had Chinese musician who was also doing a PhD. So you have these different perspectives that you kind of put together. And I think intellectual conversations in college, I've loved it.
Okay.
Whether I contribute or not, I've loved being there and learning from those conversations. So, of course, when it comes to research, it's again that. I think you have to read more, you just have to push yourself. You never know when the magical moment arrives. Yeah.
Nice. In that sense, maybe taking a segue back to research, do you want to approach it with a timeline? Do you want to approach it with a goal? Or do you want to keep it open and see where it takes, and then have a conscious, practical approach to balance the two? And I know this answer would change as you like move forward into doing the research itself, right? And one of the, let's say, comparisons I want to bring into this is just a couple of weeks back, uh, I was playing around with AI and I was looking for something, right? The GPTs and like different versions of AI. Just in the last 2 years, the amount of information that it is able to process in a way that it is useful for us, right? I still remember 2014, 2015 when Google used to do the auto recommendations, and or YouTube used to do auto recommendations or suggest. It would be all over the place. I liked it because I didn't want the YouTube to give me suggestions that are similar to what I already hear, right? But it would be each individual's preference. Some people like genres, and so they like to go with that, right? But then 3 years down the line, I remember that it became really good. It became so good that it would actually pick up songs that are similar, right? And similarly, I'm seeing that same 2 to 3 year timeline improvement in the GPTs or in the AIs, which are able to give you information beyond what I would have imagined was possible in two years timeline. I thought that was like a 10-year timeline thing. Why I'm asking is it's going at such a rapid pace that if they enable audio visualization within the AI framework or as, let's say, partnership with other frameworks, I have a strong feeling that it is going to significantly impact research in a way that much of it would become just reporting, and you'd be able to do things in 6 months that you would otherwise take 5-6 years to do. Purely because as an engine to analyze such large volumes of data is present at your fingertips within a second, which you otherwise, let's say in the 1980s or 90s, you would be super happy to have read 2 books from 2 different libraries, right? So why I'm saying is I'm excited for what the technology is able to offer to us, but at the same time I wonder, as I'm seeing elsewhere where AI is reasonably well developed, that it is going to take a lot of the focus out of individual efforts that somebody like you would be pursuing and drive a lot of that towards using the machine of artificial intelligence to do it. What, like, have you encountered that already within your coursework, or is there discussion around that with your peers?
I think right now in humanities, academia kind of wants to keep AI completely out.
Okay.
In a way, I think they also want to deny that it's going to do anything for the research, but that's not true. It's definitely has changed because you have these AI tools to just read the documents for you. So you don't have to sit and read 40 pages, 50 pages. So for us in coursework, we have like almost 100 pages of reading for every course, every week. But there are applications that you can use to just do that for you. And they'll give you like conclusions of what is there and what are the important points. So that's already available.
No, I'm even seeing examples more recently. As composing music for one of the dance programs, and I was looking for Hindustani bowls. I did not want Carnatic sologatas.
Right.
It is not that I was actually using the Chat GPT or Microsoft Copilot just to test, okay, how good has this become? Not that I was looking for answers. I was very surprised by what it is able to do. And the beauty is it gives you references to where it is taking those answers from, and then it can tailor make answers for you. So if I say, give me a Takadamita, and then convert that from Takadamita to Hindustani bowl, to Kathak bowl, to Pakawad specific bowls, it's able to do that. Now earlier you needed the expertise of an individual to contribute to that, right? And now, because all that is recorded, a machine is able to just analyze all that and extrapolate and correlate and give you an answer, right? The question I have is, because in my research, as I was exiting my postdoc, we started seeing the impact of AI. Consciously, a lot of the grants that were supporting experimental work died down.
Oh, okay.
Right. Why? Because you're able to use AI and get significantly better impact in what you're trying to look for. Right. So now what that does, and that is where I was coming with, which is that you'll still be able to pursue the research, but with the help of AI, not individually by yourself.
Right.
And you are in the time frame for the next 3-4 years when AI is going to make a huge impact. And it's going to be parallel to your career in doing research. Now it could be excellent, because if you're in a deadlock, you get an answer so quick that inspiration comes from AI. It could also be the other way, that you don't get the satisfaction of having deep dived into an issue and become a genuine expert of the topic, rather than just outsourcing it to somebody and getting the headline for it.
Yeah, I was about to say that. So AI can give you the conclusions or the important points, but then it doesn't make you an expert of it.
Right.
So I sometimes feel, especially seeing my little cousins and all, so they think the data which is there on their phones at the fingertips is here. It's not.
It's not.
It's not the same as having that experience or having
Yes.
learned it and saying
Right.
and just checking on your phone.
Right.
They're two different things. So when it comes to research in music too, it's when you're there's nothing that you're going to innovate, right? It's research. You're
Right.
searching for something new
That already
within what
exists.
already exists.
Right.
So whatever it is, even if you're using an AI tool to search you something, I think unless you know it well, you will not be expressing it, especially within the
Arts. Okay.
It could probably affect a production, as you said.
Okay.
Production, of course, has a lot of,
Okay.
but it also, I think it's just organic.
Okay.
It's just you have to learn new techniques of doing it.
Right.
Probably who does better, who knows to use AI better will probably
be more successful in the eyes of the world.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not so much that I agree or disagree, but the immediate example that comes to my mind is when we were studying like middle school, high school, we had the logarithm tables. They would not let or permit us to have calculators.
Right.
In university, from until my second year, I couldn't, and then the coursework enabled because some of those calculations were too intense and there was no other way to do it. But if I had grown entirely on a system that enables you to use calculator from your like primary school, would I ever be comfortable learning the math to do the tables and to practice that every day? No. But the question is, do you need it? Right? And that ties back, I think you already sort of touched upon that, which is you don't generate anything, right? But I think the argument with AI, at least that's where the industry is trying to push towards, is that it's not that you are going to be able to generate, it's that it's going to outdo you in generation as well. Right. Now, they have not exposed to the public what it can do, but I am really familiar with a few peers of mine in other industries who are doing that, and they say it's already at a place where it can generate things.
Right.
They're just not releasing it to the public because they want the right project to hit a jackpot because it's a company industry product. But it's very interesting because I relate to exactly as you said, which is the phone became smart.
Right.
Did I become smart?
No,
not necessarily.
We are actually getting worse because we don't remember anyone's numbers now, which we used to like 20 years ago.
We didn't put effort to remember that. It happened naturally. And now because you're enabled, you're lazy in your mind and you're not doing it. Right? No, because you're a teacher, you're also pursuing your own research. So in a sense, you're doing your independent studies and enabling yourself better as a student. I was curious what your thoughts were about that. Maybe like a slight segue around it. In terms of, let's say, musical items, let's take a sort of detour into that. You have all the way from Swaravalis, then to Geetams, then Swarajatis, then Varnams, then Kritis. And Kritis with different structures. Every composer did something different, right? Is there something particular that you like a lot, just as a question of taste, that, okay, I really like this. I like everything, but this one stands out and is like really close to me, like a Tilana, or not one Tilana, but the concept of a Tilana or Padam or Javali.
That's very difficult to answer, I would say. So it depends on probably what state of mind I am in. But generally, I like slow compositions. And I like compositions that have more depth in both, ragam wise as well as content in lyrical content also.
Story content.
So I just like to sing slow compositions, and I like mandrasthai. So it which is very what do you say?
So like Dikshitar Kritis.
Exactly. I just love Dikshitar Kritis, Javalis. I mean, I love all types of composition. I love Tilanas. I love fast compositions too. I just love to do swarams on faster compositions, or Deshadi Talam. I just love the the
timing sequence, the laya that comes
that comes with that. So there are different things, but generally, when I sit with the tambura, I would like to sing some
elaborate,
slow
mantra
composition
style.
and mandra sais, and yeah.
Do you feel yourself ever attracted to Hindustani music, Dhrupad style,
I
which has
do.
that tendency?
I do. I
Okay.
listen to a lot of Hindustani too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you listen to it to maybe consciously take, or let's say not necessarily consciously, but do you imbibe things from that in style, or do you say, okay, I enjoy it, I maybe practice the vocal techniques to get that kind of dynamics, but I'll keep my ragam closer to what is normally done?
Yeah. So I do not, like, if I'm singing Kalyani, I will not
Listen to
listen to
Yamana.
Yaman and bring it.
Okay.
No, that doesn't happen. But if I have to sing like Madhuvanti or something, I would listen to it and probably see. But I also want to be conscious enough to not sing it in a very Hindustani style.
Okay.
I would want the Carnatic style that I have been taught
Okay.
to be alive when I'm doing Madhuvanti too. So
Okay.
I just am a bit more conscious about how I
Okay.
take it too.
Okay.
But I love listening to their music, and I love their laya, like the vilambit that they
Right.
do. Yeah.
Maybe then we'll have one interesting last question to sort of bring all these together. We've had such a long conversation, we've touched upon different ideas. Maybe to wrap it all up for this episode, we discussed about a bunch of things, like from your childhood, uh, Bangalore days, to here in Dallas, as a teacher, as a student, as a researcher. Maybe to bring all that up in a way that summarizes it, taking forward, let's say keeping an open end to the next chapter. What do you see your next 2-3 years as a musician in all of these spheres moving towards? Is there like a single goal? Is it like multiply directed?
Right now, it's my research
Okay.
that's taking the priority.
Okay.
So I am very excited to go and look at archivals and see like what I can find out about music that I don't know right now. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to do my research
Okay.
at this point.
Okay.
Of course, singing is always there, and I'm going to be continuing that performances wise. But the main focus right now is my research.
Okay. And this is going to pursue for the next 3-4 years?
2 years probably.
2 years.
2 years for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, two and a half
that
years.
Would be the question
Yeah,
of how it
yeah,
turns out.
yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tanmayji.
Thank
It
you
was
so
an
much. It was
enlightening discussion, exciting
absolutely.
discussion. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste.